Hi, welcome to the City and State Studio. I'm Jarrett Murphy from City Limits, and I'm joined today by the Brooklyn City Councilman and Chairperson of the Council Housing Committee, Jumaane Williams. Thanks very much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
On Wednesday, you put out a press release talking about the affordable housing crisis in the city, which obviously is probably the biggest policy issue facing the city. For the past month or so, for good reason, we've been talking about policing, about apologies, about unions. Do you think that the housing issue will get back onto the city's political agenda, and will that happen soon?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that. I mean, personally, I think, and I'm always one to talk about and discuss police reform issues, which we should. I think we're at a great moment in time, and what I'm worried about is we have to talk about all of the issues that are affecting the same communities that are usually dealing with over-policing issues. And I think if we don't do that, we're going to miss a great opportunity in time, because these communities have been dealing with a lot more issues that I think directly relate to the over-policing. And one of them is housing. And so we have to talk about all these issues together and figure out how they play together so that I can really get to the crux of the problem.
Your message on Wednesday was directed to Albany, which obviously has power over the rent regs, which will come up for renewal in June. Yep. I think, I don't want to quote directly because I don't remember, but you mentioned something that the mayor's affordable housing plan, while ambitious, kind of depends on state action. Can you tell me sort of how, do you feel as though if de Blasio doesn't get a renewal of rent regs that his plan falls apart? Does it not deliver? How
I think if you don't get rent regulation and you don't get a strengthening of the rent laws, or if rent regulation goes away, the housing plan is moot, because the biggest affordable housing plan that we had, quote unquote affordable, because people use that word a lot, is rent regulation. It's 1.1 million units, 2.5 tenants, 2.5 million people who are tenants in the city. So if we don't renew that, we nothing else really matters. But the crisis becomes an all-out. I don't even know what the city looks like without that, because it's really dependent on that. And it's important to also remember it's not just affordable, meaning we're talking about the rents, but there are also protections that come with rent regulation that people leave out of the debate that I think is supremely important. It's the right to an automatic lease renewal, and those things actually allow you to do something like demand repairs for your apartment without the fear of eviction. And having been a tenant organizer, when people were not in rent regulation, I had to tell them, you can ask for repairs, and you have the right to them, but you may not get a lease renewed. So I think anybody in any income bracket deserves a protection like that. And so it's important to have. My preference would be that the city council be able to have its own power to do that. In absence of that, there are things that we have to take care of: vacancy decontrol, hiring decontrol, preferential rent, anything that can deregulate these units, we really have to deal with. And that's what Albany really has to do. My hope is that we'll get it done this year, we'll strengthen it. And again, the mayor's housing plan is supremely important, so we're going to do a lot in the housing committee when it comes to that. But if Albany doesn't renew these rent laws, and if they don't strengthen them, we're really behind. I don't know what. The 8-ball is not even a good analogy here.
Right, the 9-ball.
Yeah, we're destroyed.
Before the election, there was a lot of hope among tenant advocates that you would have a state senate that would be amenable to strengthening the laws and would work with the assembly, which pretty much always has been. Obviously, that's not how things worked out. What do you think are the politics around this in Albany? What path do you see toward, let's leave strengthening off the table for a moment, just preserving the laws as they exist? Is that still possible now?
I think it has to be. I can't see anyone saying we're just not going to renew the rent laws. It happened for, I think, a day or two the last time, actually, which was pretty scary for everyone. I think, I mean, it's mind-boggling to think that we would not have rent regulation. I can't imagine what would happen in New York City, and also, some of the surrounding suburbs do have some left, although they're dissipating. We lose thousands of rent-regulated units per year already. So we have to renew them. There's no other option. And I also believe that we have to deal with the loopholes that help deregulate the units. We've lost probably over the 10 years, maybe close to 100,000 units, depending on whose numbers you're using. But it's a lot of units. And it's important to note that we don't get those units back. They destabilize communities, and we can't build faster than we're losing. So preservation is what's most important. We have to build, but preserving rent regulated units, preserving Section 8 Mitchell-Lama units that are coming out of those programs. Preservation of the units that we have is the first thing that we have to look at. And then we have to build on top of that income targeted units, but making sure we're dealing with the people who need the units the most.
Mm-hmm. One thing that's on your agenda, your committee's agenda this month, is 421A, which, along with the rent regulations, will be expiring this June. What are some of the questions going out here? What are questions you want to have answered by experts, by the city, in terms of 421A, or do you already know what kind of reforms you want to see?
I mean, the question is whether or not we actually need the 421A program. Then the second question is, do we need it the way that it is? I don't think you can get a yes to both of those things. It's funny, the Fiscal Policy Institute put out a report, I think it was Wednesday also, basically listing that as one of the problem tax abatements that exist to the wealthy. And I think we have to look at what is our rate of return for the money that we're getting, the money that we're giving. And so 421A, I don't believe we're getting the right rate of return. I also believe the government does have to put up money. We do have to put our skin in the game to make sure we get the units we need, but we have to demand a lot more. And I don't think the units that we've gotten back from 421A at all match that rate of return that we're looking for, and we have to look at it very hard. We have a hearing actually coming up on 421A. I believe we'll have another one again in the next couple of months. It's a very important issue. If we're going to give up our money and our taxes, which we should, we just have to make sure that we're getting the units that we need to the people who need it the most. And that's what's important. As I said before, people use the word affordable, but they're talking about 120% of AMI, 100% of AMI. Those are not the income bands that we need. We need it as we go deeper. And as a matter of fact, the higher you go in the income band, the vacancy rate expands. And so there's a lot of units on the market now that are empty. And the lower you go, the vacancy rate goes very low, because we just don't have those units, and we're losing those units, and the people who can afford it keep growing and growing, and we just don't have them. So that's where we have to make sure the money goes to. I'm very afraid that that's not what's been happening. As you mentioned, there'll be a lot of people linking 421A and the rent laws. We have to make sure that we get what we need here in New York City, and I don't think that's been happening, and I'm hoping in my committee we can discuss these issues and make sure that they're well thought through.
Let's just end with the mayor's plan itself. First of all, some people have wondered if it actually is a plan, if we actually know enough about what's being prescribed for the city, or if it's going to be neighborhood by neighborhood. I'm curious if you've heard enough detail. And the one detail we have heard is this commitment to density. And I'm wondering if you feel the neighborhoods in your own district, if they're willing to accept more density to make that plan work.
Well, one, it's very ambitious. I think it's more of a framework, and I think it's a good framework. We have to start with someone. I think it's the most ambitious one since Koch. It's definitely needed. I even think we need it even a little bit more. I'm very excited that unlike the last plan, the Bloomberg years, they started out with the majority being preservation, which is good. I think that's the way we have to look at it. We did have one hearing in the Housing Committee. I was not happy with the information that we've gotten so far, so we're going to break it down into a series of specific topics so that we can get a better understanding, and we'll see that actually in the next few months. You mentioned density. I don't think as a city that we have much of a choice. We don't really have much else to build on. We don't have the vacant land that we used to. So we're going to have to build up. The question is, do we completely change the character of a neighborhood by doing that? And so it's important to me that neighborhoods are in this discussion. You don't want to build a 20-story building in a place that has only had 2 stories. That's probably unfair. But you can no longer say we're not going to have any increase. The question is how much, what's the character of the neighborhood? And actually that's one of the hearings that I'm going to be, that I've separated out. I want to know how the engagement with the communities are going, what's the process for the communities to be involved. It's one thing to say they are involved, but as a practical matter, are they actually being involved? So I think you have 2 things. One is, yes, we have to increase density to get to those units that we so desperately need. But the second, equally as important, the communities have to be involved, and we have to try our best to maintain the character of those neighborhoods.
Councilman, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.